Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again at episode 205 as we cover the Zornheim Sleep Experiment from 2021. I'm really excited about this and some of the stuff that we're going to talk about both this week and during our interview with the mastermind behind this band later in the week. But before we get to all things Zornheim, how are you, my friend?
Very, very good. I feel like this week was a good one for catching up on stuff, listening to this Zornheim album. I've been playing Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, finally, after a year after it came out. And being that, much like Breath of the Wild, the music is very ambient in this game and almost inaudible at times, it makes for good listening to other music while you're playing it. I personally find the soundtrack to be a little bit dull, even though a lot of people really like the Breath of the Wild soundtrack. I think it's a little too understated. I'm all about speed and power and in your face, and so I'm listening to Zornheim Sleep Experiment while playing The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and it gives it a whole different dynamic.
Probably scared the shit out of you at the same time.
Yeah. But I did get a chance to catch up on some albums, a bunch of new singles. I feel like these singles are coming out fast and furious. I named so many of them last week that one of them that I was particularly wanted to mention, I just completely blanked on. So I'll talk about that today. But there's just a lot of cool stuff going on. We alluded to this the last couple of weeks, but we can finally reveal that thanks to our friend and Patreon member, Richard Mosley, who happens to be a member of the band Taliesin of Australia, he has written a theme song. I don't know that he necessarily intended it to be a theme song, but it will be the podcast theme song. After 200 plus episodes, we are going to have an official theme song, an intro and outro from this song. We are going to debut the song at the towards the end of this episode, so stick around for that. I'm very excited about it. It's actually a really cool song, and we'll talk about the details of all that as well, including who he got to sing this beast of a song, which is really cool. So that we have that to look forward to, and then starting with next week's episode, when you start up the episode, you're going to hear the new theme song going forward. So we'll still be including our track, clips for tracks of the week, but we will be now having an official theme song, and that's just a credit to how good the song is, to be honest. So, talk to me about what you've been listening to.
Well, before we get there,
these sleep experiments.
I want to talk about all things that I've been listening to this week, and quite frankly, it's been a really good week. As far as I'm concerned, in terms of new music and whatnot. But I'd be remiss not to mention our new website as well, metalexchangepodcast.com. You've been working very, very hard on this, and as a guy that has no web development skills whatsoever, I have to say it's really, really impressive. I think it looks good. It's a real clean look. It's a way to contact us. You can find info about our Patreon. There's a blog there. Lots of cool stuff, and only getting better. So thank you for all your hard work on that. And we would encourage everyone to visit the website, metalexchangepodcast.com. So thank you for that. And again, as always, thank you to our Patreon members for all your support. You really do make this podcast possible, and we are eternally grateful. And actually, some of our Patreon members actually got a nice treat in the mail as a result of the guys from Zornheim. So more of that to come in future weeks and months, I'm sure, but just a little teaser and a thank you from us on behalf of the guys in Zornheim. But yeah, there were two songs in particular that came out this week where I was, one, just thrilled to hear this band again, and the other, just, I don't want to say shocked, but pleasantly surprised at how good this other song was. So I'm going to start with, I guess what I'll only describe as the Steady Evergrey has come out with a new single, and I think it even struck a chord with you because you sent me a text during the week and you said Falling from the Sun is really good, and I have to agree. It's not different. It's not something you haven't heard from Evergrey before, but this is just a really good song, and dare I say, a little less dark than some of their other material. I don't know. If the album is anything like this, I am really excited for this album. They have been very, very consistent as of late. After going through what I would consider a dry spell about 10 years ago or so, with a few albums that just didn't click for me. But these guys are back, and this single is really good. I think that for a guy that was never a huge Evergrey fan, this one was clicking for you too.
This band is like, I was listening to this song and I was like, is Evergrey good?
After 20 years, it's finally dawning on you.
I kid, but like the last couple of albums from them, it has more of this kind of just bombast, if you will. Like it's so like it has more of an epicness to it, and it really is whatever it is that they're doing. This is so much more in my wheelhouse than kind of the dreary earlier days of Evergrey, where the name says it all. I love this. I'm excited for this new album. The album I think is going to be called Theories of Emptiness. I am excited. I want to see if this album cracks it onto my list, because if this song is any indication that we're headed in the right direction. But there was some singles on their last at least one or two albums that were a lot like this that I really enjoyed. So I'm finalizing another playlist. This is right towards the end of my next playlist. I really, really liked it, and I like when Evergrey does these kind of songs. It just has like this real full, just I don't know. I like it a lot. So I'm glad you mentioned it. Big fan of this track. If you haven't checked it out, or if you've been avoiding Evergrey like I have for many years because you just felt like they were kind of dreary, they've kind of like picked up the I don't know. There's like a little bit more oomph. It feels like.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And you mentioned your playlists, also easily accessible from the website as well. So check those out there. Kind of a one-stop shop for all things Metal Exchange. The other single I wanted to mention is from a band that hasn't done anything in like 8 or 9 years. I was so excited to find out that Sunburst out of Greece was releasing new music. I just thought that they were a one and done. And that was a shame. Their album that came out in 2016 called Fragments of Creation was really good. I mean, really good. And I would argue that it's probably the best thing that Camelot hasn't done in decades. Like really, really good. And it had great production, phenomenal guitar work, soaring vocals that really just were reminiscent of classic Roy Khan. And we didn't hear anything from them for quite some time, but they announced earlier this week that they were coming back and that a single dropped yesterday as we were recording, and the song was called Hollow Lies, and it too did not disappoint. Another album that I think has the potential to be up there at year's end. And I say that because even though I'm kind of going through the first quarter of the year and change, and I have albums that I definitely thought were quite good, there's a lot of stuff coming that I think might eclipse that which I heard in the first quarter of the year. The Evergrey and the Sunburst being two of them. So good times ahead. Did you have a chance to check out Hollow Lies?
Yeah, as soon as I found out that they had a new song, it was funny because it popped up on my Facebook feed, and I was like, I didn't even remember that I followed Sunburst, first of all, because, like you had mentioned, they released that first album to, I think, a lot of acclaim. They were set to open one of the nights of Prague Power. They, I think, ran into some sort of visa issues. And then, like you said, I hadn't heard anything since. So all of a sudden this track comes across my desk and I was like, all right, let's check this out. And they picked up right where they left off. Album will be called Manifesto. And like you said, I think that there's a lot of heavy hitter albums, I think, that are really going to be like giving everything that came out in Q1 a run for its money. And like you said, the Evergrey and Sunburst are going to be two of those albums. But band came out with an album yesterday that we've covered on the podcast, and they're probably known by quite a few people. They're called Pearl Jam. They released an album called Dark Matter, which is their first full-length release in quite a bit. Their last album dropped in, 2020. That was Gigaton. So it's been 4 years, and I've listened to Dark Matter once through, and I really liked it. It has, I think, the potential to be my favorite Pearl Jam album in potentially the last 15 years,
Wow.
which isn't saying a lot because there's only been 3 other albums, I think, in the last 15 years. But I really liked it. I think it's really eclectic. Each song really seems to have its own kind of feel to it. It's not derivative at all. So I'm super excited to go back and listen to this. They released a new single, Wreckage, also this week. That I believe it's the 3rd single from this album. That song will also be on the next playlist as well. But looking forward to digging into this some more, and hopefully it kind of gives some new extra fun tracks to throw into the live set list, because there's some really good stuff in here.
I'm glad to hear that. The last few albums, while I thought there was some decent material, they had a bit of a sameness quality to it, where I don't think songs particularly stuck out. Whereas when you go back to that early material, which obviously I'm a huge fan of, every song sounded so separate and distinct. It didn't, everything stood out. So I'm glad to hear that this has a bit of a different vibe throughout the whole thing. I am eagerly awaiting the opportunity to listen to this. I just didn't get to it yesterday, but I will definitely be checking out this weekend.
Yeah, for me, like the post 90s Pearl Jam era has been really interesting. I was a really big fan of Riot Act and the self-titled album, which came out in 2002 and 2006 respectively. And since then they've released Backspacer, followed by, I'm just scrolling through the unbelievable amount of bootlegs I have from this band. Lightning Bolt in 2013, and then, like I'd mentioned, Gigaton in 2020, and all good albums, but just good, and good's not good enough for me with Pearl Jam. I thought the self-titled, or Avocado album, if you will, is a personal favorite of mine. It kind of marked my kind of renaissance as a Pearl Jam fan. And when I started seeing the band live finally, I thought that Backspacer had some really good tracks on it, but it was very short. It was, I believe, under a 40-minute album. And there were just some songs that were kind of meh for me. Gigaton also was like just okay for me. I think Lightning Bolt was my favorite of those 3. I could probably really go down the rabbit hole with this band, so I'll stop there. But definitely recommend giving this one a listen. And I look forward to next week. We'll reconvene, and you can tell me what you thought of it, because I think it's good. I think there's a very good chance that by the end of the year, my list is going to include both Pearl Jam and Green Day. So
Pearl Jam, Green Day, and Evergrey, 3 things that I didn't think you would say in 2024.
And Zornheim, if this album had come out this year.
Fairly certain it's the first time that anyone has ever said Zornheim and Green Day in the same sentence, but I digress.
Possible.
Anything else that caught your ear?
Yeah, I'm going to have to try to pare it down a little bit, but the track I wanted to mention last week that I totally muffed on was Dendera. Our friend Ash Edison, who's a podcast guest twice. Him and his brother Brad, their band Dendera is still going strong in the UK. Ash is also, as he mentioned in his previous appearance on the podcast, that he's singing for the band Tiger Tales, and for those unaware, he was also the last singer for Power Quest, a band I happen to like quite a bit. The rest of the band, Stephen Main, Andy Finch, and David Stanton, they've released this new single called Mask of Lies, and it's going to be from the album of the same name, which is coming out in June. really good stuff. There's some Dendera is a very heavy band, like a heavy power metal,
but not abrasive. And I think that's the key. They're heavy. They are very heavy, but it's quite melodic, and I think that's part of the draw there.
Yeah, and there's some good death vocals on this track. I have to ask Ash if he was the one who did those, or if they brought in somebody to do the harsher stuff. But it's a really good track, and I'm excited to hear the full length album. And I apologize to Ash for not mentioning it last week when it came out. But I definitely recommend that for sure. In addition, there was just this absolute deluge of singles that I listened to. Thankfully, we mentioned two of them already. I will mention again the band Elvalon, who we mentioned their first single from their upcoming album, Ascending in Synergy, which is coming out on May 17th on Napalm Records. They released another single called My Forever Endeavor. I'm excited for this album. These two tracks I've heard so far are really kind of what we want Nightwish to sound like nowadays. It reminds me of older Nightwish, but the vocalist Nelle Messerschmidt, her vocals remind me more of Floor than Tarja, to be honest. So it's kind of a cool, almost like a mashup of Nightwish eras, but they do it in their own kind of unique way. So fan of them, and I'm excited for their album. Additionally, a band who's released a bunch of singles and I completely missed them was Nocturna, who released their Of Sorcery of Darkness album this week. I went into listening to this album with absolutely no preview, because I just must have completely missed the singles when they were released. I believe it was Seven Sins and Strangers were the two singles that they released. So I just listened to the whole album unheard, and I really enjoyed it. Their first album was on my list for 2022, fairly high up too. And so this is a band headed up by guitar player Federico Mondelli, who also you would know from Frozen Crown and Volturian. This is a dual vocal situation with Ren Still Night and Grace Darkling taking up the vocals. On first listen, I'll be honest, I liked it more than the Frozen Crown album that was released last year. So I will definitely be returning back to this, but really good symphonic power metal, in my opinion.
Yeah, there were a couple of standout tracks on this. Some of it I thought was just okay, but there were some tracks in particular that I particularly enjoyed. And as I was listening to it, I was thinking of you, because I just knew you would eat this up. So right in your wheelhouse.
Italian female-fronted symphonic power metal. I mean, come on, it's all my things all rolled into one.
We all have our tastes, and that's yours in a nutshell. So I like it.
Yeah, and then I guess I'll mention one more track, even though I could probably mention a bunch. But a band that I really enjoy, and how I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Mob Rules, they had done that cover of Iron Maiden's Run to the Hills. They've released another cover from their upcoming 30-year Celebration Day compilation album. And it's a cover of Irene Cara's Fame. And I thought it was I'm not really familiar with the original, but it's a really cool song. Again, you'll find it on the next playlist. But it among the Iron Maiden cover, they also will be doing a cover of Ghost Square Hammer, which I believe has yet to be released. This compilation is coming out in a couple weeks on May 3rd via Steamhammer. So I'm looking forward to some of these newer tracks. They also have a Dio cover, Sacred Heart, although I believe that one was previously a bonus track on an older album. So I will mention that. And I guess I'll throw in also, I'm pretty sure we didn't talk about this last week, Correct me if I'm wrong, but did we talk about the new Seven Spires single, Architect of Creation? Now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like we may have.
I think we did, but nonetheless, really, really good stuff. And I think that that's another album to watch out for sure. But yeah,
I think we posted it. We posted it on our social media, I believe, during the week as well.
I just becoming even more consistent. I'm lucky enough to see them live. They're filling in for Hammerfall on a few of the North American Camelot dates, and I'm not getting Hammerfall. I'm getting Seven Spires. I'm going to see that on Friday. So I'd
argue that's an upgrade, in my opinion, from a live standpoint.
I enjoyed the Hammerfall show when they opened for Halloween, but I just saw them, and I haven't seen Spires in a few years, and I have a feeling they'll touch, hopefully, on some of this new material as well. And their last performance that I saw at Prague Power was nothing short of fantastic. I mean, they went from a band that was playing really small clubs. I remember seeing them in New York City with 30 people, and I don't think they're far away from headlining that festival in Atlanta. They are on fire, and really, there's the rocket, the proverbial rocket, has been strapped to their back, and they are only going higher and higher. So kudos to them. It's well deserved. I think those albums are really good, surprisingly good in many respects, and only getting better with a little more seasoning and just the constant touring, I think, has helped them to put on just a phenomenal, tight live show.
Well, then instead, I'll name a different song instead, since we did that already, because it just popped on, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is really good too. Xandria released a new single. It's, I think, just a standalone track, because they just released a full-length album last year. But this new track, Universal, is really good. Like, I thought that their album last year, while it still made my list, it was disappointing in that it didn't rank as high as I was hoping it would. And especially, I forgot, one of our friends really hyped it up. I think, was it Brian said it was his album of the year?
Brian loved that album. And although I appreciated it, I didn't think it was album of the year worthy to me. But I'm glad to hear you like the new single. I hadn't heard it yet, but I did see that it had dropped. It just didn't get a chance to listen to it.
Yeah, if the album was more like along the lines of this track, I think I would have liked it a lot more. Granted, it's just one song, but it's really good. This playlist, as I'm looking at it, is rife with symphonic metal bands. Xandria, Elvalon, a track from Annette Olson's upcoming solo album, Nocturna, Seven Spires. Like, there's just a lot of symphonic stuff on here, not to mention a track from the new Tyr and Korpiklani albums as well to get your folk blood coursing. So I'll have this up soon, and like Justin said earlier, there's a link right at the top of the website to all of our playlists on Spotify. If you're looking at the website on a mobile phone, I think you have to open the menu on the top right, but there are links to our playlists. There's links to the Facebook Metal Exchanges group. There's a link to our Patreon. And I definitely urge you to write a blog. We have a blog area, and we would love to hear your long form thoughts on whatever the hell it is that you're thinking. Like I had mentioned in a post, within reason. Try to keep it music related, I guess. But it would be really cool to see people, post to the blog. So just very cool. And thank you for the kind words about the website earlier. I'm really excited about it. I find myself going to it like on a daily basis and just kind of looking through it. And it just makes me happy to see all of our work over the years just kind of compiled all into one, convenient and clean looking space. So
yeah, well said. And I think with that, with that backdrop, shall we forge on and talk about Zornheim's Sleep Experiment album? This, in many ways, was a COVID product, I guess. It came out during the heart of COVID, October 22nd, 2021. And I say that because what I think we found was that with everything locked down for the better part of a year and a half, or 2 years, what have you, but a lot of bands were putting putting out some great material for no other reason than they couldn't, they weren't playing a ton of live shows, at least here in the States. I know in Sweden, they were a lot less restrictive than we were, but again, they weren't doing world tours at this time. So musicians really had no choice but to kind of, hunker down and record some new stuff. And then the touring, obviously the floodgates would open up shortly thereafter. But this was recorded, during COVID, as I said, and it's one of the concept albums that I am just an absolute sucker for. And I say that because we've covered Queensryche and Operation Mindcrime, and we've obviously talked, although I don't think we've covered it necessarily, Dream Theater Scenes from a Memory comes to mind, Mercy Falls by Seventh Wonder, these kind of prog concept albums, which I am just, I'm always intrigued by. And when done well, they often rank amongst my favorite albums of all time, just because I think that there's an element to it that makes me keep going back. And so when this kind of came on our radars and we did a deep dive, or began doing the deep dive, I really appreciated the concept here because it was different than some of those albums that I mentioned in the past. And I say that because it comes not from a, story-based slant, although obviously this is fiction, but it really comes from a horror slant in many ways. And I thought that was an interesting twist. I will say that I had a real pleasure reading the comic book that actually came along with this album. And I should say that what happened was the band released the album in 2021, but they would come out with an EP just a few years later, last year, called The Forgotten Inmates. And it features some different versions of some of the songs on the album. But when it came out in November, they also released a comic book with it. And it really kind of shed a lot of light, at least for me, on what this story was about. And other than kind of the chills that I got up my arm when I was listening to it, it made me think of Mike and our mutual friend who would have probably shit himself if he was reading this and listening to the album. So shout out to Mike. You are a gentleman and a scholar and probably hiding in the closet right about now. But yeah, the whole concept behind this album really kind of drew me to it, let alone the fact that the music itself, which we'll get to, is different than, or maybe I'll say more than, other bands that are doing this type of music. And I say that because it touches on so many different genres, and I hear so many different things in this relatively short 37-minute album.
Yes, that's very, very well said.
Sorry to ramble there, but
please,
yeah.
Please. After the first 70 minutes of this episode of me yammering on about symphonic metal, it's the least you could do.
And I should be clear, I think the album's actually closer to 41 minutes, but it's not the densest of albums. It's relatively short and succinct, but yeah, it touches upon a lot of different genres for sure.
I was worried that this was going to be like a hard listen for me, and it really wasn't. And I think part of that is because, a couple of the tracks are kind of like segue tracks or outro tracks. So like the meat of tracks is not a ton, which made it, I think, easier to digest. It's really interesting, like what you said about the COVID era of like artists and having to do things a little bit outside the box out of necessity. Arion released, their most recent album and also released a comic book that came along with it. And so I ordered the vinyl version of that Arion album because I really wanted a copy of the comic book, because I thought having like a graphic representation of what, especially with a story. I mean, imagine a graphic novel of Mercy Falls or Operation Mindcrime, like how cool that would be. And so I think that, not enough bands do this. And I think that it's really, it completely paints the musical experience a totally different way when you have this visual way of really seeing what the story is and what the story the band is trying to tell. And in this case, an incredibly dark one. But I really find that something like that really, it adds and improves to the experience, and having faces that go with each character. It's really cool because, let's face it, it's not cost effective to produce, a 45-minute YouTube video with actors and like making a basic, like the Who's Tommy. Not everyone has the, Roger Daltrey money. So, this is a great way of representing that in a visual form. And I thought that would add such a great, view into this world and this creepy ass story of the Zornheim Sleep Experiment. Musically, the whole, like I mentioned last week, this whole thing kind of came up because the band was inspired a lot by Rhapsody, particularly Symphony of Enchanted Lands, and like you could definitely pick up on that, but yet they insert a lot of black metal and death metal elements to it, and it's almost like this extreme version of Rhapsody, but it's done like really, really well. I really like this. I'm hoping that there's some people out there that are just like we were, like just had no clue that these guys were out there, and it kind of opens their eyes, because this is it's really cool stuff.
Yeah, and this is one of the questions I actually have for them. Like, I don't remember hearing about the album when it came out, and I feel like it's a little surprising to me, because I think I have somewhat of a finger on the pulse of at least stuff that's coming out. I'm not saying I listen to or hear everything or that I know everything, but this one just went right under my radar. So, needless to say, I'm wondering, how a band like this kind of gets their name out there. And to your point, I think that the visual representation is great. And even the time and effort and energy that went into it, it's really well done. So I would strongly suggest everyone go to their Bandcamp page and pick it up from the band, or obviously their website, which, all that will be, down low in the links. But yeah, really interesting. And just to kind of, I guess, give a brief synopsis of the story, it's basically two different doctors, we'll call them, or scientist doctors, that are essentially gathering people for the purposes of conducting this sleep experiment. And one of the doctors has a little more compassion, we'll say, than the other, who's obviously a little bit warped and deranged. But it's how they keep these people kind of captive in many ways, and what kind of transpires from there as a result of lack of sleep and drugs that they're basically administered throughout this process. It's really, really dark, and I won't spoil it all for you, but needless to say that the music fits the story exceptionally well.
No arguments here. I don't think I was prepared for how kind of dark the story really was. And when revisiting the music after reading the story, it almost makes the music feel darker, even though the music stayed exactly the same. Knowing the story gives it just more of this kind of darkness. It's really interesting. When we have our conversation with a member of the band, we'll delve into where they how they came up with this, and just like all the inspiration behind it and all that. But it's a really interesting story that they're trying to. I feel like I'm better off just kind of reading from it, just to better explain it, because clearly I am at a loss for words here. But really, I really like kind of the whole intro paragraph, which is Dr. Bettelheim's statement of intent, which is: the average human spends almost 1/3 of their lives asleep. Why is this? What happens with the body, mind, and soul when we are sleeping? Is it because the body needs to recover itself and for the brain to process all the impressions we've had during the day? Or is there something more profound behind the answer? These are the questions that form the foundation for the Zornheim Sleep Experiment. And basically what they're saying is that when we're asleep, our inner demons are tranquilized, and it controls the primal evil that dwells within every human. And so if a human doesn't get any sleep, then they will give in to their carnal urges and go on a murdering spree or whatever it is that it is, that their demons compel them to do, and sleeping is what keeps that at bay. So they figured out a way to extract something from the human brain that would keep them awake, and not be able to fall asleep. And their experiment was to see what the behaviors would be if they had to give in to their inner demons without the sleep being able to quell that, which is not something I've ever really thought about before, but it's really quite fascinating. Quite frankly, I think if I went days without sleeping, I might do some things that I'm not normally would consider doing, but maybe not to this extent. But it certainly is covering some ground that I had never thought about or considered or had any experience studying or anything like that. So very interesting stuff.
Yeah, and like I said, for my purposes, although I think you'd kind of classify them as like symphonic melodic death metal, if I had to put a category on it, there's definitely touches of power metal here, which we'll get to. There's touches of black metal throughout this thing, and just a lot of classical as well. They just kind of blend genres nicely. The album kicks off with Corpus Vile, a real melodic death metal tune with
it's Corpus Vile.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You gotta get your Latin in check.
My apologies. You're absolutely right. And after I said it, I was hoping just not to get called out on it. But alas, Gregorian chants, power metal riffs, and a really liberal but nice use of like church bells behind it. I thought that was kind of a cool vibe. What's also awesome is that I think the interplay between the growls and the cleans are really, really good. The album is predominantly growls, but a lot of the choruses, and this song is no different, the cleans on the choruses provide a really nice contrast. And in many cases, they actually have the cleans with growls behind it. So you're actually hearing dual layers of vocals, which I loved. What's interesting is that at the end of each chorus, there's a really high note that the singer hits, and it reminds me of Dragonland in many ways, which I'm like, I never expected to, looking at the band's logo, you'd never expect the comparison to Dragonland, but here we are, another band from up yonder. And then you have this instrumental section where I think it's almost neoclassical with almost like an Yngwie Malmsteen vibe or something like that. A really up-tempo tune and a good way to kick this thing off.
I thought that the use of the clean vocals to represent the patient and the death vocals to represent the doctor, it was brilliant.
Not what
it's
you'd
simple,
expect.
but brilliant. Yeah, I just thought that was really smart. It's like, I feel like it also gives you like a little bit more sympathy towards the patient because they don't sound nearly as chaotic and crazy as the doctor does. But this is kind of like the intro to the story. Just let the doctor letting these people know, like, hey, you're going to be in this sleep experiment for 30 days and not get any rest. And I believe these are all people in a mental institution or something like that. So like they're probably not
the healthiest mentally to begin with.
Yeah, not too stable really to begin with. So but it definitely takes a more sci-fi-esque turn. What seems to be kind of like this like almost medical kind of thing goes in a sci-fi direction as we kind of move on. But I thought this was a really awesome opening track just to kick things off. I like this one a lot.
And I should note the band behind this is the mastermind here is Zorn. He does all the guitars, the bass, the synthesizers. Skucha on guitars and backing vocals. A guy who goes by Bendler on vocals, and that's doing leads, and Steve Jocham on drums and percussion. You might know Zorn by some of his work with Dark Funeral. He toured with them, I believe, back around 2011 to 2014. I think that's where he's most well known. And then after leaving Dark Funeral, he went on to form this project. And Yeah, it's funny because I feel like people that are in the know did rave about this when it came out. It just didn't get a ton of notoriety at the time, and I'm really curious to hear what the band's got in store going forward, because I feel like they're due for for some more music. But going back to the album at hand, the second track, and this is kind of interesting, they go right into this 25-second like symphonic interlude as the second track. So they make no bones about it that there's kind of a unique progression with these types of tracks. It's called An Evil Within, and it leads into Dead Silence, which is somehow even faster and really heavy on the blast beats, and has, at least for my ears, really like a melodic black metal vibe to it, which I am all about. I enjoy this quite a bit. And when I say that, it's really with regard to the vocal delivery and the pacing of this thing. A lot of heavy orchestration, very reminiscent of Emperor, who I will talk about later because there's some news in the Emperor camp. But what was interesting is that the pre-chorus and the chorus have almost this waltz-like quality to it, which is very different than the verses. And again, just that nice blend of cleans and harsh vocals. And while it's a really fast, upbeat song, there are parts that kind of slow down only to kind of pick up speed again. So the cadence to this thing is fantastic. And it's specifically in the bridges, where I think there's multiple bridges on this that just slow the tune down. And then I think it makes the faster parts stand out that much more because of the contrast. I'm a really big fan of this song, and I'm actually going to make it my song of the week. This one, Dead Silence, just was a real winner for me. I want to hear your thoughts, but let's give Dead Silence a listen, and we'll come back right after this. So that was Zornheim's Dead Silence, my track of the week. Didn't really let you speak much about this one, so I want to turn the floor over to you. What are your thoughts on this one? I just, something about this tune just really jumped out to me. I really enjoyed it.
I chose to be dead silent during your explanation of your feelings for it. It's got the black metal connection is definitely here, especially the vocals are like really take me into that kind of world. And that's why I like black metal when it's done in a symphonic style. I feel like that there's enough for me to kind of get past the spookiness of it all, if you will. But
speaking of hiding in a closet, I feel like you're not far behind after this song.
No, I'm headed right there. I like this song a lot too. It's very aggressive vocals and drums and then like you said, like slows down and then there's like strings and it's like this beautiful symphony of the absurd. I would probably put it, combining the story and all that and it's crazy. Like this whole story is this is kind of like the one of the patients like kind of coming to terms with what this experiment is and what it's going to do, and it's creepy as hell. I'll just put it that way. But good choice for song of the week. I just think we're off to a really good start here with this album.
So to that end, I'm curious how we're going to keep the devil away with the next track. What are your thoughts on this one? This is a little bit different just in terms of the stylings. I hear less black metal and more of something else, but I'll turn the floor over to you.
Yeah, this was, I believe, the band's first single from the album, with the next track being the second single. This one has a little bit less of I think, that kind of dark black metal kind of vibe to it. It's a little bit more... I'm trying to like find the words for it. Like it gave me a little bit of like Seven Spires kind of vibe to it. Like just the symphonicness with like the, Adrian's like growls or whatever.
Yeah, demonic to say the least. It's got like, to me, it's like symphonic death metal. I don't know if you've ever heard the band out of Italy. I think they're out of Italy. Flesh God Apocalypse. This is what it reminds me of. It's death metal, but the symphonic nature of it and almost the operatic vocals in that band really make them stand out amongst their peers, and really kind of spooky live, but really well done. That's what I hear on this. More symphonic death metal, less black metal, at least on this, on this tune. But I think it's a really good song. But it's the word I would use is haunting, and I think that it's a well-placed song because it's just kind of again a nice contrast to the song before it. It's the guitar solos also have this really nice, clean sound on it, and the bridge with the vocals, the clean vocals, actually reminds me of Camelot. This is a really good song, and I think what jumps out at me on a track like this is really well produced. It sounds great, and for an album that I don't know had a ton of support or financial backing from a huge label behind it, it's amazing how well this thing sounds.
Couldn't agree more. I thought the same thing, actually. This is an interesting part of the story in that, like, the patients are referring to the doctor as the devil, and that because they feel like he's torturing them, and they're kind of begging the other doctor, Dr. Gutzman, to free them from this and don't let this other, this crazed doctor, Dr. Bettelheim, continue this experiment. And so they're basically like begging the good doctor to, like, you have the power to stop this, like, because clearly things are starting to happen in this chamber, and there's, the subjects are starting to treat the masks that are giving them this, this gas, if you will, to keep them awake. They're starting to like circle around them and hold the masks in reverence. And so clearly there's something very, like supernatural, I think, going on at this point in the story. They were nice enough to provide us with like this really detailed, like, personal notes from the doctors, like within the story, just giving it even more depth. So really interesting stuff. And I don't want to go like too deep into the story part of it, because I want, everybody to experience it kind of the same way we did. But really interesting stuff. It's again, like, really creative stuff, and it's impressive. I'm really excited to talk to the band and get some, like, firsthand details about the making of all this and all that. It should be really fascinating.
I think what's clear to me is that when they're writing this stuff, there's a lot of influences that they're pulling from. I think of the next track, Slumber Comes in Time, and I hear like an amalgamation of bands that I know are kind of, near and dear to you. Because, like, with the symphonic intro, it just reminds me of something that would have been plucked off of an Epica album. Like, just clearly heavy on the orchestration, kind of really cool sound effects that when you're listening with headphones, they really pop. It's almost like surround sound in a way. Some of the best riffs are on this particular song. And what's interesting is when you get to the chorus, the cleans actually remind me of something that Falconer would have done. Which again, another Swedish band that we've covered in the archives, interviewed as well. Just a really interesting blend here, and then there's like a folkiness to it, like which again you wouldn't expect it on an album that's kind of this aggressive, but just a folky sound to it. And then when you get to the instrumental section, it speeds up again, and it goes back into like more of a power metal vibe. So a lot going on here, and you would think, based on my description, that it would sound like a train wreck, but it's actually the antithesis of it. It actually blends together very well, and you can see just kind of all these influences kind of coming together.
Yeah, I like this song a lot. It's my song of the week for sure. It's the first track I heard. This is I believe this was the track that Zorn had recommended. Kind of like, if you're going to listen to one song, listen to this. And so I've been listening to it for a bit longer than the rest of the album, and it's really stuck with me. And I love just the chorus that has, like multiple, it really literally is a chorus of vocals, is really well done. It reminds me of something from like an old Rhapsody album or whatever, but, agreed 100% that there's like an Epica / After Forever vibe going on here with the orchestrations and everything, but I couldn't get away from this one being my favorite track. I just all those things that you mentioned are all things that I enjoy, and the way that it was all kind of combined into this track just was really, really well done. So this is my song of the week. Our two songs of the week coming a little bit on the early end on this album, at least, I guess. I guess the first half. But let's give it a listen, and we'll come back and see how our subjects are doing.
Excellent choice. And just given the influences that I heard on this track, I'm not surprised at all that you would have gravitated towards this song. I think you could have picked a lot of songs, but this one in particular, I think was, certainly in your wheelhouse. So I appreciate that. And that brings us to Black 9, which is this very...
It's actually pronounced Black Nine.
Yes, another Latin
just
song.
kidding.
Very, very operatic sounding vocals, and very, very kind of like a chilling vibe to it. It's rather heavy. The guitar noodling, especially towards the beginning, reminds me of almost like a Castlevania type of feel, or something that would have been found on one of those game soundtracks. This is a song I would want to hear live, and I feel like if you had the band in place with the right visualizations behind it, it would really, really stand out. And what I think jumped out to me was the great use of the piano and the orchestration in many ways that don't really overpower the song, but just supplement the rest of this tune. And the pacing during the vocal lines also kind of stood out to me. I like this one a lot as well. It was in contention for Song of the Week, but I obviously went in a different direction.
For me as well, I love the combination of those really high-pitched staccato vocals, and then like that kind of like harpsichord or like old organ Castlevania-esque sound. This song is done really well. Probably my my second favorite song on the album, and it's close. I will say this is the other one that I kept going back to, and just the way that it starts, it's just like I just love it. Like I'm not even going to attempt to recreate those high vocal, that start out the song, but this is kind of where I feel like the story really starts to take kind of a turn, and again, just another really good track. I love the mix of vocal styles throughout this whole album is just really cool to me. Like you have like death vocals, and you have more black death vocals, and there's great clean vocals, and then in this song you have these like kind of high pitched operatic staccato vocals. There's like a lot of cool vocal things going on, so that it doesn't just feel like a really deathy or just like a 100% death vocal, stomp through. And I feel like I would have enjoyed the album less if it was just death vocals all the way through. Like just the fact that there are more than one character, and that the different vocal styles actually represent different characters in the story, I think also really make it stand out. So I think this track is a really good example of something that's going on in a macro sense on the entire album on the whole, but really cool stuff.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that as we get into the veiling of Bettelman's eye, it gets even spookier with the sound effects and whatnot. And it's another shorter interlude, heavy on sound effects. This thing is just downright spooky, and really, in many ways, I guess serves as the intro to the revelation. This one's a little bit slower paced, and kind of gives me the vibe of a blacksmith or something like that. But the song gets progressively heavier as you get into it. Very deliberate sounding. Not my favorite tune, I'll admit, but I appreciate what they're trying to do, and it's got some really great guitar solos as well. If I have to be critical, it's probably my least favorite song on the album, but it's definitely helping drive this story along as the patients are kind of in this. I think we're in a state of hysteria at this point more than anything else.
That's well put. One of the bands I think that this band reminds me of that we haven't mentioned is Therion. There's some. This is almost like an evil Therion kind of vibe to it. I clearly. It feels like this is something that you enjoy more than Therion in general. So I feel
no
like
doubt about that.
They're taking the parts of Therion that I think you would enjoy, and it's more in that direction. But I think the combination of kind of dark elements with the symphonic vibe kind of reminds me of a bit earlier Therion. I feel like Therion's kind of become more symphonic and less dark than they used to be. And so I get kind of vibes of that as well. The Revelation, another song where I feel like this one's a little bit, again, I'm getting like those epica orchestral kind of beats to it, but this one's a little bit more of a mid-tempo song. Some of the earlier tracks are a bit like fast-paced and gallopy, if you will. Wouldn't want to go through an episode without saying gallop, but this one I think kind of slows down the pace a little bit, and it's kind of has more of a haunting kind of vibe to it because of that. What were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, no, I like I said, I kind of mentioned it earlier. I just think that it's like a heavier tune with that very deliberate sound, but not my favorite track. I actually prefer the next one more. And I think the joke writes itself. Keep cutting, right? I mean, like, what else? What else do I have to say there? But kidding aside, what I love about this song, and it's kind of like the last real song on the album, because the last track is more of an outro. But Keep Cutting has this Carrick Angren black metal vibe meeting Children of Bodom power metal, which is really cool because those are two very, very interesting bands. Again, with those layered vocals. Especially during the verses that I think stand out to me. the melodic nature of the choruses is also a draw for me. I think that when you have choruses that are kind of earworms, that is always something I look for in many ways. That said, the guitar solo on this, probably my favorite solo on the album, and just a really solid farewell as the experiment is coming to an end here.
Yeah, it seems as though things have gone horribly wrong in the chamber. The subjects now went from begging to be let out to pleading to be kept in. Things are going horribly wrong here. This is kind of a last-ditch effort by the doctors to keep the experiment alive, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the case here. But this is a good, like you said, like this is kind of like the last full-length track. The lyrics are I mean, the song's called "Keep Cutting" for Christ's sake. So I mean, what do you expect? It's not what you expect as not a 2006 emo song, although that probably would also make sense. But it's a haunting ending to a very haunting story, and it's interesting because it in a way it reminds me a little bit of Saw in that the whole thing just takes place in like this one room. You know, it's like all contained in this one area. I feel like it would make for a really cool, I don't know if it's enough story to feel like a full length film, but maybe like a shorter, like I don't know, like an hour or something. Like, I think it would be really fascinating to see this, see this comic book, so to speak, turned into like a motion picture of some kind. It would be really interesting and I think quite terrifying, honestly.
I think that if you put some more meat on the bones surrounding the background of the doctors, the background of the patients, fleshed out the ending a little bit more, I think you could definitely turn this into a full-length film. And I have no artistic ability whatsoever, but I'm curious, and that's going to be one of the questions I kind of want to get to, which is, are there bigger plans for the story here? Because I feel like if you're a fan of horror or this type of music, not music, but like this type of story, I feel like you could do a lot with this depending on what you wanted to do. And then I think that you could probably do a sequel if you wanted to, as to like what happens now that the experiment's over. What happens? Do they stay in the chamber? Do they leave? How's the murder spree look? I mean, like there's a lot here, but it's definitely an interesting story. And then the album proper wraps up with the madness that lurks within, a well-produced outro that in many ways is just this symphonic yet ambient ending. And if you weren't aware of the story, you're asking yourself like, what the fuck is going on here? And it kind of leaves you wanting more, which is really a testament to the band and the album.
Yep, agreed. It almost feels like it's the like a segue to like another like half, like maybe there's like a chapter 2 or something. But again, this also, I'm glad you mentioned Epica, because I don't know that it would have crossed my mind, but you're right. Like there's very Epica or After Forever in a way. But I'm getting that with this track. Anything that really is heavy on the like strings and the symphonic part of it, I really feel that kind of rings true. But I don't know, like maybe there's a second story where the doctors try another experiment. Who knows? But this was like a really just a cool experience. And I'm really grateful that the band like reached out to us and just said like, hey, that Rhapsody episode you guys did, that album really inspired what we did. And you can see that here. They took, I think, the bones of that kind of symphonic power metal and really added a bunch of other elements to it to make this very unique album with a very unique story. It kind of actually reminds me of an album we'd already discussed, Abigail by King Diamond, where it's just like this incredibly horror / like dark story. And it was just done really well. But talk about another album that would benefit from the graphic novel treatment. That would be really cool to see kind of the visuals of that. but yeah, this was really cool and a really fun thing to dive into, and it's to go from like a band I'd never heard of to like being really impressed is always one of the highlights of doing this podcast for me.
Yeah, no, well said. I think that that's part of the allure here, and I agree. I think the King Diamond comparison is very apt, just because of the concept albums that he had done with his band, and the similar flavor to it. Obviously, an influence in many ways, although musically, quite different. But yeah, good stuff. I'm glad we got a chance to cover it. So I'll toss it over to you. Scale of 1 to 10, the Zornheim Sleep Experiment. What are you giving this thing?
I'm giving it an 8. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's a really solid, just like way above average album that took me by surprise. I was expecting to like it, but not as much as I did. Especially kind of just going off of that one track. And then the first time I listened to the album, I was like, oh, this is pretty like harsh. It's heavy and harsh, but the more I listened to it, like you really put it very eloquently, that like all of these different styles are kind of all come together, and it really works for me. Like some of the things that I'm not as big of a fan of are lifted by the stuff that I am a fan of. And so I reached out to Caleb the other day, and I was like, dude, you have to listen to this, because I think like this is something you would really enjoy. And I got a message back from him 30 seconds later, and it was just like, well, based on the first 25 seconds, this is something I think I would love. So
nice.
How about you? What were how did you rank this one?
I am right there with you. I've had this thing at an 8. I knew I was going to come in at that number. Once we started recording, I feel very confident in it. And I think that if I would have heard the album back in 2021, I have no doubt it would have made my year-end list and been fairly high, just because an 8 is a really, really good score. And you're getting into rarefied air with some of those 9s that we've given out in the past. So really good stuff. And I think the future is exceptionally bright for this band, which ironically enough produced what's otherwise a really bleak album in many ways. So yeah, really cool stuff, and more to come for sure. Before we get to the news, shall we debut the song that we alluded to earlier? I think it is time for people to hear it.
Yeah, this is really something else. The song is called, I'm almost embarrassed to say it because it has my friggin' name in it, but the song is called the Blade of Nicchi, and it makes reference to Kramerian steel. So both of our names were used with I would say effervescent permission, and to say that I was pleasantly surprised that Richard Mosley would pen this song. And I should mention that his reasoning behind it was because from listening to the podcast and listening to some of our episodes about power metal, it was, he wanted to write a power metal song because, his band Taliesin is kind of more on the prog end. And so I think that this was kind of, tickling his power metal fancy. And why don't you tell the fine folks who he got to sing this song?
Another name in the prog world, which is what makes this all the more interesting. Vocal stylings of one Michael Mills, known from Toe Heater and Arion. Like, this is wild, and this collaboration came out of nowhere. I don't know if this is going to win them a Grammy or anything like that, but I certainly enjoyed the hell out of it, and I can't thank both guys for putting this together. It's a really interesting listen. I'm a fan of both of Michael Mills's, obviously his main band, but obviously we've talked to Arjun in the past, and both have a love affair for his work with Arion. So thank you both for this, for the song, and more to come with the song, I know, as well. But we'll leave that and just kind of make you wonder on that one. But with that all being said,
well, we should also mention that by the time this episode drops, which should be on Monday, April 22nd. This song should be available to listen to on Spotify and wherever else. Hopefully you can buy it on iTunes. I believe there's a lyric video that should be out by the time you hear this. The band is called Blood Sky. That's the name that Richard gave this, and the song is called The Blade of Nicchi, Nicchi. Still surreal saying that out loud. So I definitely would hope that you go out and buy the single, listen to it, watch the video, because I think I feel like I'm not really the best person to say this because my friggin' name is on it, but it's really good. So go find out for yourself. I think everyone's going to be pleasantly surprised by this. And as we mentioned, this is going to be this theme song to the podcast going forward after the Zornheim conversation episode later this week, next week, and we'll reveal what we're talking about next week after the song. But this will be the new intro and outro to the podcast. So after 200 plus episodes, we have a website and a theme song. So we're really going places.
Let's give it a listen. This is The Blade of Nicchi. Well, there you have it. After much anticipation, that is the Blade of Nicchi. Again, thank you so much to Richard and Mike for putting this together. It's amazing that you got two guys from the prog metal world coming together to write a power metal tune and having it better than half the power metal that comes out these days. I mean, the whole thing is hysterical to me. But thanks again, guys. In all sincerity, this is great. We are honored, and we look forward to hearing this each and every week. Before we hear your album for next week, which I'm very curious about, I just want to mention a couple of short news items. Talisman is back to reunite for the Sweden Rock Festival later this year. Jeff Scott Soto and his band is back after what seems like a long hiatus. Really, really interesting stuff. I don't know if they are going to do anything after or beyond this show, but a Talisman reunion in the works for later this year at Sweden Rock. Pretty cool stuff there. Bruce Dickinson likely going to do a U.S. solo tour next year. I know that I'm going to see them in November with obviously Iron Maiden, and I'm looking forward to that. But a Bruce solo tour in a small venue, I'd be down for that, like a smaller venue. I think that would be really cool. The set list that I saw from some of the shows that he did within the last couple of weeks, really, really interesting. A nice blend of the new album and also, some of his older, solo material. And I think you like the new album quite a bit, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to mention it, but I was surprised because I saw that there was kind of some divisiveness, I would say, to the album. But I liked it. But I think part of the reason is because I don't know his previous solo albums very well, so I didn't have really any expectations, and I'll be honest with you, I enjoyed it more than the last Iron Maiden album. At least on first listen, I thought there was a really nice selection of types of songs. Like I mentioned about the Pearl Jam album earlier, like it felt very just widespread as far as types of songs, including like a song that sounded like it came out of the Old West. I enjoyed it, maybe just because my expectations were non-existent. I thought it was quite good. So I think we should cover one of the older solo albums at one point, because especially I heard a lot of good things about Chemical Wedding, and so
I love that album. Yeah, no, definitely. I think that'd be great. And I just want to mention one more thing briefly. 70,000 Tons of Metal has started announcing bands for next year's cruise, and to their credit, they've already announced 10% of the lineup. 6 bands have been announced. And some interesting bands here. The first band they announced, kind of the cornerstone band for this cruise, is Stradivarius, which is no argument for me. I'm always open to seeing them live. And they piggyback that off with Emperor, which is, I saw them for the first time on that cruise, and they put on a phenomenal show. So Stradivarius and Emperor are kind of the bookmarks for that cruise, along with Candlemass, Kalma, Tankard, and The Covenant. So some really, really interesting stuff for next year. I look forward to seeing the rest of the lineup. Always, as I mentioned, excited to see Stradivarius. So I'm excited about that. But with that, as we forge forward next week, what am I listening to?
So I was kind of going through the archives, and I was a little bit surprised to see that there was a band that we talk about a lot that we've only done 2 albums by, and that band is Nightwish. And we did Oceanborn very early on. It was our 3rd episode. And then we returned to Nightwish in late 2022 and talked about Imaginarium. And I feel like now we need to talk about a Nightwish album that Floor was the vocalist on. And I don't want to talk about Human Nature, so that kind of narrows it down to one other album. Endless Forms, Most Beautiful, was released in 2015. I was thinking about possibly choosing, Wishmaster or Dark Passion Play or Century Child, which I think is a bit underrated. But I thought, to be fair, we've discussed a Nightwish album with the 2 previous vocalists. Let's talk about one with the current vocalist. And another reason why I chose this is because I know that I I don't think that you're a huge fan of this album, and I'm hoping that going back to it, maybe you end up enjoying it more than you did when it first came out. So I think that this was something good, and it's something I kind of wanted to do in between this, Zornheim week, and then we have our next request, which these requests just seem to come like faster than I remember it. And April was a long month. We actually managed to squeeze in with the Zornheim interview 6 episodes in April, not to mention the bonus episode forthcoming for the Patreon members. But yeah, on May 6th, we have our next request, courtesy of our friend Josh Anderson. We will reveal that next week. But I was kind of hoping to kind of go back to one of the more traditional bands in the meantime. And this one, kind of just based on how long it's been since we've discussed Nightwish in long form, thought it was appropriate.
A very good choice. I am not a huge fan of this album, or at least I wasn't back in, when I listened to it the first time, and it never really grew on me. I feel like it's one of those albums where the sum of the parts is greater than what they did on this particular album. I love Floor's vocals. I love Nightwish, in many respects, but this album just never clicked for me. So a great choice and something I look forward to going back to. So with that said, we'll go back to some Nightwish next week. Thank you again to all of our Patreon members, and of course to Richard and Mike for the Blade of Nicchi, our new theme song. We look forward to coming back next week with some brand new Nightwish discussions, and thanks again to all for listening. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I feel like this one went a bit long, but that's okay because we had a lot to talk about. So please check out the website, listen to the new theme song, go play it on Spotify, go watch the lyric video, buy it on iTunes, just do it. Just do it. Our friend Richard would thank you. The band is again called Blood Sky. Next week at the onset of the episode, you will hear, once I figure out which portion of the song I want to use for the intro, you will hear it. And that will be our intro song going forward, which I'm super excited about. So yes, I echo those thoughts. Thank you again, Richard and Michael. Super, super psyched about that. And, again, the website, metalexchangepodcast.com. Leave a blog. I guess that's it. I've run out of things to say. So join us on Thursday for our conversation with, is it Zorn that we're speaking to?
It is. So it's all things Zornheim with Zorn himself.
All right, fantastic. I will be sure to ask him if he likes mashed potatoes with his fried chicken, and we may have to explain to him the joke there. But anyway, thank you for this. This was really a lot of fun. I look forward to. It's not too common that we'll review an album that a band reaches out to us on, but when an album is impressive, I think it deserves to be, have a spotlight shined on it, and this was no different. So I'm hoping that we get maybe some people that hadn't heard this to give it a listen. I know Richard had said he hadn't heard it until recently, and he was digging it. So going full circle with our theme song maestro and our current topic. There you go. So I think I'm going to go rest my vocals. But good stuff.
Cheers, my friend. I will talk to you soon.
Take care.